Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, and today I'm talking all about the skills you need in work beyond the technical skills, the things, the people skills, the networking, the navigating politics, the influencing, the having impact, with Joanna Gaudoing, who is the author of the book Getting On, Making Work Work, and a real expert in this area. She talks about her career history and being in the corporate world and working in marketing, and then having a big career transition and working more in this space of advising and helping and guiding and training other people, especially those technical experts, the people who are trained to be technically brilliant at stuff, that then get to a point and maybe get a bit stuck because they need more than their technical expertise. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I will pop on at the end to talk about the things that I'm taking away with me. Enjoy. Welcome to my episode with the wonderful Joanna Gaudoin. I'm so excited to have you here today, Joanna. And rather than me introduce you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and tell us a bit of your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Hello, Beth, and hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me on your show today. Really excited to talk to you. So there's lots of big questions there.
I
could probably
know.
talk about for a long time. Perhaps if I do start, I go chronologically, perhaps, and start with who I used to be, and that might
Yeah.
flow nicer into today. I had a management French degree that I did at University of Bath, had a year abroad, was a linguist at university. That was my favourite thing, really. And came out of uni and went into marketing. I was a grad trainee with Kimberly-Clark in their French and UK markets. And then, quite honestly, decided that I didn't want to get stuck in marketing. And I also didn't want to get stuck in Kent, where their office was, because there wasn't much happening for someone in their 20s. And I was camping on my friends' sofas every weekend to go out there instead in London. Decided I would try and get a role in consultancy. Everyone told me, oh, you won't manage that. You've only got 3 years experience and, they won't take you. But actually was really fortunate, really fortunate, and got the first role I went for. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was quite a surprise, a bit of a shock after what everybody had said. So I went to work in a marketing effectiveness consultancy that was part of one of the big media companies, and I wasn't doing the analytical modelling. My husband, that's what he still does now. That's where I met him. But I was doing all the understanding brand stuff, making sure the insights we were giving back from the models were usable within the business. So real consultancy role, understanding brands. So I got to work on exciting things like dog and cat food. So that was quite insightful. Uh, then the work I was doing there didn't really, it was coming to an end, the type of projects I was working on. So I went frying pan into fire and I moved into commercial due diligence with a small consultancy. So working on whether private equity should buy a certain company, looking into their markets. And I'll never forget the first task I was given. It was to size the global market for mechanical seals.
I don't even know what a mechanical seal is.
That's exactly my position at that point. I had not the foggiest clue what that was. Apparently, they go in pumps.
Okay.
Mechanical pumps. So I was soon realizing this role was not for me. There wasn't much client contact. It was very researchy, and I'm really not a research person. And I put on 2 stone in weight eating cake to make me happy every day. So that was clearly not good. But I then did have to hide my joy when they were paying me to leave with redundancy when the recession hit in 2009. So that was a bit of a funny time. No one likes rejection,
No.
but it was good for me because it wasn't the right career at all. Within 3 months, I went and worked for another marketing effectiveness consultancy, which I really enjoyed. Actually, that was good, working with SAB Miller quite a lot on their alcohol brands. They don't exist anymore. And then a load of the directors decided they didn't want to work with the key founder anymore, so they left. And couldn't take all of us with them. So that was all a bit interesting. Where are we going to get paid? or not. And there's sort of a long story how that's all manifested in the end. But I fundamentally got to the point where I just didn't feel I was using my gifts, skills, and what I enjoyed.
Mm.
As I was just really stuck. And my then boyfriend, now husband, said, "Well, what are you going to do? Because every time you go to a recruiter, they just try and put you in the same sort of role again."
Yeah.
Which I'm sure many of you have had experience of. And so he said, "Why don't you work with a career transition coach?" I thought, "Oh, okay. I haven't really thought about that before. That could be something worth exploring." And it's really interesting how this stuff happens. But the first friend I mentioned it to, she said, "Oh, two of my friends have just worked with this woman and she was brilliant." I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll give her a
Mm.
call." She was called Olivia. And long story short, I started work with Olivia and she was fabulous. She really got me to step back and think about what was I really good at, what did I want my days to look like, what were my values, what was important to bring in my work. And after 2 months, I quit my job, which I
Wow.
think uh, yeah, my boss was a bit like, "Oh, okay, I could see this wasn't quite the right role for you, so maybe you've helped me out here,
Yeah.
but we were friends as well, so it was an interesting one." And for the next few months, I essentially did contract work for the directors that had all left because they now had another business and they couldn't afford people full time, but they were offering contracts. I did a bit of navel gazing and I worked for a Christian charity a day a week that was raising money for projects in Africa to help people out of poverty. So it was a really great way to spend around 6 months of my life doing that. And I genuinely had no idea what I was going to end up doing. I really didn't. And it's 12 years this month, in fact, since I quit my corporate job. And even at that point, I had no idea what. I certainly didn't think I'd run my own business. And the sorts of ideas we went through as part of the coaching were really quite varied. And it's quite an entangled story as to how I got to where I am now. But essentially, two of the things that came through was I wanted to support people to develop and grow within their roles. I realized there was more involved in success at work than just knowing stuff, and I
Yeah.
wanted every day to be different. So those were three key things. And so in autumn 2011, I retrained in image and impact, how we communicate with people, how we build rapport, how we come across in different professional scenarios, and trained in that from a perspective of working with individuals, but also group as well.
Mm.
And I've not looked back. So it's been fantastic. I've had nearly 12 years of working with individuals, usually middle to senior level people who've got stuck, usually stuck because they've not worked on, I don't like the word soft skills very much, but not worked enough on those people skills and how to relate to others. Or not built their profile at work, not built all the relationships they need, or not built their skills for different professional scenarios. So I have a great time working with them, and then I speak at conferences. So I'm a professional speaker. So obviously there are fewer of those since the pandemic, but that's really interesting in lots of different sectors. Most of the people I work with are in professional financial services. I'd say 80 to 90%.
Yeah.
So lawyers, accountants, actuaries. And then in the middle is loads of training, masterclasses, workshops, and sometimes that's a standalone piece or it's part of a large program for a certain level of experience. So maybe senior associates in a law firm, and there are other training providers coming in as well, or they're running internal training. So it really is great. I get to work with loads of different direct clients, as in the people that are in my sessions, and then also the overall clients, and understanding different organisations and sectors and what's going on there. So that is a potted history for you.
I have got so many questions. Are you ready for me to dive in with some questions? Because I think
Okay.
there's so many interesting pieces of that journey to pick out from a WorkJoy perspective. And the first one I wanted to pick out is I wrote it down and then I highlighted it and circled it 3 times. And when I do that, I'm like, right, we need to talk about this thing. Is this idea that everyone thinks they've got really good advice for you, but actually quite a lot of that stuff you shouldn't listen to.
Yeah.
So people telling
Yeah.
you, oh, that'll be really hard, like that'll be really difficult. I don't know if you'll
Mm,
be able to do that. The
yeah.
doubters in your
Yeah.
world aren't helpful.
No, they're not. And I obviously won't name them because some of my friends, you never know, might listen to this. But there was a particular meal I went to around the time I was starting to do the career transition coaching. And one of my good friends, and she's still a good friend, turned around to me and said, What on earth do you need that for? We've got a management degree. Can't you just sort out yourself what you're going to do? Like, that is possibly one of the most unhelpful things someone could have said to me right now.
Yeah. And
That you
it's
should know.
you should know. But actually, and as a coach, I would say this, but um, we need to get out of our heads sometimes, and we need other people to help us do that. And a lot of the
Definitely.
time, when it is friends, etc., they're projecting something from themselves onto
Mm,
you and your
mm,
career versus you being able to kind of step up for what you really want. And there's people who doubted that you could get the management consulting job, and you got the first one you went to. There's
mm,
a difference in mindset there about how you can approach it. And sometimes we just need to remember who's in our squad, who's supporting us, who's able to really work with us, and to be able to kind of drown out the doubters and the mood hoovers and the people who aren't being helpful for what you need at
mm.
that moment in time.
Exactly, and they're just, as you say, sort of projecting from themselves or not able to ask the open, perceptive questions. I mean, equally, I've got another friend and a very good friend from school, and she's a teacher, so a very different industry to me, but she is one of the most perceptive people I know. She asks
Mm,
fantastic questions. You know, "Oh, I've noticed you said this." So it's never about pushing her thoughts, it's
yeah.
about interrogating in a nice friendship way, something you've said that she genuinely finds interesting, and she draws attention to things I talk about myself that I wouldn't notice
Yeah.
about my life and career.
And I think that's a really interesting point, maybe for our listeners as well, is that if you are in the situation where you might be listening to one of your friends or one of your colleagues have a career or a work challenge, rather than have an opinion, why not ask a question instead?
Mm, yeah.
Why not say to them, so what do you think about that? Or where might that
Mm,
lead you? Or how are you feeling about that right now? And what could I do that would be helpful for you right now?
mm,
Versus well, I don't think you need to do that. Why can't you just do it? Why can't you just get on with it? Or no, you should
yeah.
just stay in the career you're in. Why are you trying
Yeah.
to change things?
Really important, because otherwise that just shuts the person down and they're thinking. And I have to be really careful because of what I do when my friends start talking about their work challenges, and I sometimes say to them, do you want my friend response, or do you want my
Yeah.
professional head on, or do you want a
Yeah.
mixture? And please just tell me which of those is helpful to you right now, because I
Yeah.
don't want to, not that hopefully I'll be shutting them down and giving them loads of direct opinions on what I think, but it is a slightly different approach from being someone's friend to being,
No,
they're my
definitely.
clients essentially. So,
I also highlighted the one that said eat cake, and I don't know if that's just because I'm a
mm,
little bit hungry, but
yeah.
I think in here about sometimes we do these things, don't we, to kind of, this is the thing that's giving me a little bit of joy, but actually I want the joy from the work, not the cake.
Yeah, it was a real problem. You know what was funny as well? I missed this bit out, but I used to at lunchtime go and spend a long time at the gym,
Yeah.
because I am quite into exercise, and then I'd go and buy a massive jacket potato from the shop with loads of stuff on it, and then have the cake, and it was just also counterproductive. And a lot of it was just filling the gap of unhappiness. So even though the people were nice, they were very, a lot more introverted than I am, and because I didn't get much people contact either internally or externally, I just found it really hard. So it was definitely a comfort eater. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
probably
I
still
think
am.
actually if there's something like that, people, we often soothe ourselves with certain things, right? Whether it's food or
Mm,
exercise, or whether it's, getting home and opening a bottle of wine, whatever it is. If we're having to soothe our work day, we probably need to do some work on what our work should actually be.
yeah,
how can
yeah.
we how can we change it? So obviously
Mm,
taking that, and I think you said at that moment in time it was quite good timing, because they decided to make you redundant at the same time as you were thinking of leaving, which, if you
mm,
can make that work, is a really good way of
yeah.
making things happen and actually redirecting yourself into something more exciting, something
Mm,
different. And
focus.
it's yeah, and it's so interesting, kind of that mention. I often find this happens with people, and I know it's happened to me, is that one person will suggest something. So I think you said your husband suggested like a career transition coach, and
Mm,
then different friends also said it, and they had
mm,
people to refer you to, and like really
yeah,
utilizing that network and kind
yeah.
of going, who do you know? Because I think, finding a coach, finding someone to work with is so often best done by recommendation than it is by
Absolutely.
trawling the internet for who's the best. I mean,
Mm,
I'm a coach, you do a more advisory kind of work in there, but finding the right person to work with who's going to
mm.
help you in the right way can be a bit of a challenge.
Absolutely. And I actually have a pretty much a policy now of I don't buy any services cold because I have such a big network, I don't need to. So whether it's
Mm,
personal things, I was telling you, Beth, that we're having our whole house renovated. I
yeah.
went recommendations on most of the things. One didn't work out quite so well, but that's fine. But in business, I had someone approach me the other week trying to sell me something, and I did actually look at what he sent, but I thought, actually, why would I just buy this cold? I probably know at least 10 people that could recommend someone to do this, and I'd feel more confident in who I was moving forward with. So I think that's really important.
And I think actually, I wonder how much of this is in your work is that so often in our careers, we get stuck in a certain area and we forget to utilize our network or we forget to build our
Mm,
network. But
mm,
actually, our networks are important beyond just work. They're important for kind of like the life stuff. They're important for, future careers and connections and all kinds of stuff. But
mm.
have you found with the people you work with that that's a missing component sometimes?
Oh, massive, so big. And people think building a network is only important if you have a business development responsibility.
Mm,
And I've spent my life trying to work with people to say, no, 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 it has a lot more value than that. And
yeah.
also, even if you're not responsible for BD now, you might be one day, and suddenly to start trying to network well is hard. And if you
Yeah.
build a network now, even if you're relatively junior, then those people become more senior with you. And I think a great, very telling story is I'm talking about lots of my friends today. Hopefully, they won't identify who they are. But one of my friends from university, she's had fabulous jobs in banking the whole 20 plus years since we left university, but she always moved roles with a former boss pretty much.
Yeah.
So they would go 6 months later, they'd take her with them, so to speak. And great, shows she's valued, really good at what she does, very specific area of banking. But then, we met up for a coffee one day, and she was saying to me how the politics had changed. She'd sort of been in line to step up to her boss's role when he, moved on, different role, moved organisations. But the politics had turned against her, and she clearly needed to get out. They weren't making her redundant; they were just diminishing her role. So really awful, sad situation. Actually, I do a lot of work on negative office politics, so I could help her a little bit with that
Mm,
as well. But I said to her, "Well, you clearly need to get a new role. What about your network?" She's like, "Well, I don't have one." I said, "What?" I said, "What do you mean? You've done all these jobs in these enormous organisations." She's like, "I've just never bothered." Uh, and she uttered to me, "Yeah, I'm not going to make that mistake again,
yeah.
from now on." And she did get a new role. She's actually moved to another part of the country, and she's moved into a bit of a different sector. But it was a lot harder work. If you've got a network, it's so powerful for getting advice. I recommend to clients they have exploratory conversations with people they know. So even if they're not people that necessarily going to help them find a new job, they help their thinking through about what is next for them.
Yeah.
Um, that's so valuable, and also jobs do come from that. I've had a client recently, and I met him in a corporate context to potentially do some work for his law firm, and then he wanted to leave, and he actually came to me for impact interview help, but had an opportunity identified for him because he just had a casual chat with someone in his network about what was going on at his law firm, and they said, "You know what, we'd love to use your skills in our consultancy organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's create a role for you." And that's what they've done, and he's so happy with that. And that job didn't even exist before that conversation. And then, yes, he went through quite a lot of interviews, and he wanted to make sure it was right as well, which is completely the right thing to do. But it's worked out fabulously. So you can't build a network when you need one. So I'm always saying to people, build that, and people don't realize how much it matters.
Oh, it matters so much. And I always think you've got kind of an inner network. I call that like your squad, the people who are kind of really in it with you. And then you
Mm,
have an extended network of people. But actually, the network for me is one of those things that it's so easy to put on the end of the to-do list and never get it done, but then
yes,
so necessary to be number one on the to-do
yeah,
list when any kind of transition is happening for you, when you want to develop, when you want to grow, when you want to have some kind of conversation outside of your organization, when you want to think about a new career, when you want to change careers. Like, your network is going to be the thing that helps you do all of those things. So
yeah.
I think you're so right. It's not just about business development, it's about personal development.
Yeah, you learn so much from other people, and from a role perspective, but as you've just said, from a personal career thinking perspective as well, and the support you see, especially if you go to quite a regular event and see the same people and reconnect with them and really build those relationships, because those relationships take time, and it takes time to fully get to know people as well. It's not a,
Definitely.
meet someone once. I talked to someone last week from my network, and they happened to, actually, it was on LinkedIn. So someone I regularly recommend to my clients. I think I was telling you about her earlier, Beth. So she is a career transition coach, and she
Yeah.
quite often works with clients if they really want a big career change. They work with her first, and they come to me to help position them for the market. And I had absolutely no idea that she was a specialist in the DISC framework and
Mm.
diagnostic. And I've known her a long time. We've had multiple conversations, and just from seeing a comment on LinkedIn, I was like, oh, I didn't know you did
Oh.
that. And so it takes time to learn about people and really build those relationships.
It does. And I think as well, one of the things I always say to people when we're talking about networking as a core part, and I see it as a core part of WorkJoy, actually, your network can bring you joy. If
Mm,
you if you work on it in the right way, if you get the right people in there, definitely can be
mm,
a big source of it. Is that networking doesn't have to be about going to a networking event. If you're not particularly into that, it's about one-to-one relationships as well. It's about having connections and valuing that. So we can do it and
mm,
we can build a network in many, many different ways. Going to a networking event is a really easy way of making that start. But
mm,
actually, it's about the continuation, isn't it, of that relationship and
absolutely.
getting to know each other. And
Mm,
you know, even if it's just going for a coffee every now and then or having a Zoom call or whatever it is, investing in that relationship
mm,
when you don't
yeah.
know what the outcome might be. So there is the risk, you don't know what the
Mm,
outcome might be.
mm,
But I can tell you now that, it's been, you've been 12 years. I've been about half the time, about 6 years into working for myself, working in my own business, running my own business. And 99% of all of my work comes through my network.
yeah. Very similar for me to referrals and networking is most of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's really, really key. And because when you run your own business in particular, you, you've got so much to be doing that you do want things coming that way. Cold things are nice too, but it is very helpful.
It's really helpful. So I think maybe number one bit of advice from us today is network, nurture it,
Yeah,
do some stuff
definitely.
with it.
Yeah.
And you're never too late to start. So you don't have to be like, oh, I haven't done it and I'm 40 and I know I need to do it, but I haven't done it, so I won't start. You can still go and do it now. Any time is a good time to start
Any,
building that. Sooner
absolutely.
rather
And
than later.
yeah, and if you, as you said a few minutes ago, Beth, if you don't be really intentional about it, you won't do it, because there's always other things in your day-to-day work that will pull away your time. So you do need to, I call it, put career time in your diary. And in that
Yeah.
time, it's planning for networking would be one of the activities I would always suggest people do in that
Yeah.
time. But if it's not in the diary, it's not saying it'll happen every week if it's in the diary, but it's more likely to happen sometimes than never if it's not in there.
Yeah. And I remember when I was in an employed role and I realized after a couple of years that I'd been slightly neglecting my network. So I was like,
Mm,
oh, I've been kind of become a bit interested. I've been working on, big things. I was doing some qualifications at the time. It was like I haven't really invested in it. And one thing I decided to do is to keep it really, really simple and just go and have, this was pre-COVID. So obviously we weren't doing everything online. In fact, I'm not entirely sure Zoom existed back then. But I just did once a month. I said I was going to go and meet either somebody new or somebody from my network who I really valued and have a coffee and have a chat with no agenda, just a catch up with them.
mm,
And
mm.
I've that was probably about 10, 12 years ago. And since then, I've just kept going with that, but I do more and more. So I don't just do one a month now, but I keep doing it. And I just find it a real source of joy.
It is. It's so fulfilling, the networking piece. When you can link people up, it's really, really
Yeah.
great. I really enjoy that when you can help someone. And I had a really nice story the other week, actually. Apparently, two people who I knew independently, I didn't realize they knew one another, went for a lunch. Well, didn't, I don't think, until this particular lunch they went to with another person. And this person, who I now know, I didn't know at that point, said, "Oh, I need somebody to help my barristers improve their business development skills." And both these people simultaneously gave my name, which was
Amazing.
so lovely. I was like, so pleased about that. It was really, really nice. And, likewise, I've had similar help. I've gone out to my network and said, does anyone know someone that can do this? And I get an answer back very quickly, which is extremely helpful. So. It's
Yeah,
great.
and those connections are so brilliant, aren't they? To put people in. In my book, I suggest that your squad there's 6 different roles, and one of them is a connector role. How do you connect people to each other? And the more we think about that, I think the better we can be at networking, because it grows
Mm,
our network when we help other people grow theirs.
mm. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
I've got another topic I want to talk to you about from what you were talking about, which I think is really interesting, and this is around your, special skill around helping people with the I know I don't like the word term soft skills either, because I don't think they're particularly soft. I think they're necessary.
No,
But
absolutely.
the non-technical skills, the
Yeah. People
communication and
skills
networking and the
and
people
yeah.
skills and all of that kind of stuff. And I was really interested in what you were saying about kind of working with lots of lawyers and accountants and kind of the professional people. Is I think, and I might be wrong in my opinion here, but this is my opinion. I've worked with those people before. I've worked in finance. I worked in the legal sector. I know the type of people you're working with. They are so trained to be technically excellent, and it's totally
Mm,
built into training from day one how to be technically great at your job. And then people get to a certain point in their career, and to be able to move maybe into a more leadership role or into a more business development type of role, or just any role with expanded beyond the technical capability responsibilities,
mm.
but they've not been trained for it. There's been
No,
no
no
consideration that that's a
support.
really, really important thing. So
Mm.
no wonder there's people there going, hang on a minute, I am 10, 20 years into my career, and suddenly nobody's judging me on whether I can technically create that brief brilliantly anymore, or whether I can
Mm.
do the financy stuff and get the spreadsheet. I don't know, get the spreadsheet to say the right number at the end. That's how non-technically assured I am in terms of things, what goes on there. But I'm thinking here, there is that point, isn't there, where people go, oh, I haven't done this and now I'm behind, or feel like they're
Mm.
behind. And that
Mm.
must be really hard for those people, being
Mm.
excellent and then being behind.
Mm. No, I think it's a real difficulty, and I spend a lot of my time saying to people, "Well, why should you know how to do this?" If
Mm,
you take the example of managing people, for example, so even if that's in an informal, engagement, client engagement, or project way, why should you know unless either you've got great innate skills, you've had a fabulous role model yourself, and you've been able to
mm-hmm.
replicate those behaviours and they work well for who you're managing, or you've had some sort of development training. So unless one of those applies, why should you be good at it? People tend to think these sorts of skills, oh, they should just be there or they don't matter that much. And then people berate themselves when they can't do it
Yeah,
effectively enough. And often what happens is either people aren't getting promoted because of that gap, or I think even worse, they get promoted based on just the technical skills without the employer thinking, oh, actually, within this role, we're going to need this person to have a broader suite of skills and we need to give them more support to develop that as they're transitioning into that role.
yeah. And then you end up with them being set up to fail, right? Because there's no support
Mm,
to be able to
yeah,
make that transition.
yeah.
So it's a really difficult one, isn't it? But what we're talking about
Mm,
here, and I love the way you said, it's skills, and skills can always be developed, right? We can
yeah.
always work on them. But that perception that people have that we should just innately be able to do this stuff because it's the soft
Mm,
stuff,
mm, mm.
breaking down that perception is a difficult one.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things. There's that perception, and then getting people to realise how important it is.
Mm,
I went and ran a session in the insurance industry yesterday, and it was the start of a program. They just brought me in to do a really short kick-off on the importance of relationships, and so making the point there in lots of ways why relationships matter. But you may have heard of this, Beth, but the Coleman piece on pie theory. Career success is primarily driven by your exposure and visibility. Who knows you at
yeah,
work, then image, what do they think of you, and then performance is last. And people often don't like that because they've worked so hard. But when you think about it, it makes sense because we're at the center of our own worlds and we know what we're doing. But if other people don't know us beyond our obvious people, what I call obvious people that we have to work with, then why should they know about all our work? But it's a lot for people to get their heads around. They can see it makes sense, but it's this shift you then have to make from doing great work, but then actually getting to know people and building relationships, and so they know what you're good at as well.
yeah, I love that. And thinking about, so often we think that it's performance that gets us there, right? We think if I
Mm,
knuckle down and I work really hard, people will
mm,
notice that I'm really good at my job. But they don't,
yeah,
because being good at your job is the expectation. That's just the
Absolutely.
expectation. It's
Yeah,
just a
it's the
minimum base
baseline.
level.
Yeah.
Right. So being good at your job means tick, you'll be good at your job. It doesn't mean I'm going to notice you for promotion. It doesn't mean I'm going to think you're
No.
brilliant for a future role. It means maybe we just think you're a safe pair of hands and we're going to like let you continue doing that because you just get on and do the job. Brilliant.
Mm.
But actually this kind of piece on exposure and the piece on image and like, I always talk about it as what are you famous for in your organization? Like, what are people saying about you when you're
Mm.
not in the
Yeah.
room? What perception do
Yes.
people have of you? That stuff is far more difficult to really kind of understand because it's so not a number base. It's not a performance outcome. It is
Mm.
a human interface thing.
Yeah.
So it's harder. And it's also the stuff we forget to do when we're busy. We forget
Mm.
to really
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, don't make the time for it at all, and that's the issue with it. And then that's people get stuck and they hit a barrier they haven't before, and it comes from really education. If you think about, I mean,
Mm,
I went to a fee-paying school, so I was very fortunate in that regard. I had a lot of great input, but we still didn't spend a lot of time on these sorts of topics. And it's probably only that I was reasonably good at them because I saw what my dad did in his job and some input from school. But if you think about what you're tasked with at school, you were saying about, if you just work harder, well, that kind of works at school. I remember my
yeah.
German A level teacher saying, "Oh, you're going to be lucky to scrape a D." And I was like, "Right, I'm going to show you." And I sat and learnt my adjective endings and all the grammar and all that stuff. And I got an A, great.
Yeah.
But it's not like that at work. There's a far
No.
broader set of things, and it's not, it's a lot easier to learn knowledge, technical skills. Behavioral is fundamentally harder, not impossible, or I wouldn't have a job. You probably wouldn't have a job either. But it does take more time because it's fundamentally shifting how we think about things in our mind and how we behave.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that brings me on to the last thing that I highlighted, which I think is a really tricky one, and that is politics and office politics.
Mm.
And how do we, right? I always say to people, like, oh, I wish there wasn't politics. Well, there is, right? And there is
Yeah.
always going to be, because whenever you get
Yeah.
a group of people together, there will be some kind of
Hmm.
politics. It's just a
Mm.
fact of kind of human life. And yes, it would be wonderful if that didn't exist like that, but it does.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
but people really shy away from navigating the politics and don't like it.
Yes.
How do you help people in that way?
Yeah, I ran I ran two sessions yesterday, and the second one was office politics, or actually it's a morning one, and exactly that, getting people to realise that, as you've just said, it's always going to be there, where you've got different people with different values, assumptions, beliefs. So it's just how you navigate it, and fundamentally, if you don't navigate it, you won't progress because you need to find your way to build relationships, work with different people, and often work around the formal structures and processes of the organisation
Mm,
in a positive way, not in a backstabbing, difficult way. So it's making that point to people and getting them to see that actually, often I get clients come to me, they think everyone else is political, but then what do people think of you? Because our actions make sense to us, but they don't necessarily make sense to others. And probably the best way to illustrate this is to think about, I talk about the story often. If you're approaching the coffee machine at work, imagine a day you're in the office and two of your colleagues are talking to one another, and as you approach, they stop talking. Well, why? And there are
yeah.
5 or 6 reasons that come out there, from they're talking about me, they're having an affair, through to they just stopped talking, or they were being polite. And we don't think of all those reasons in the moment. We think of the one that's most linked to where we're at, whether we've just had a difficult conversation with one of those people, we're feeling grumpy, we're feeling lacking in confidence. I mean, if everything's just fine, we probably don't even notice they've stopped talking. So we might have in our mind the one that's the real reason, but who knows if you do. And the danger is if you then go off and react, whether in your mind or behaviourally, to other people based on what you thought the reason was. So it's why you think people are acting in a certain way, and that's really what politics is. It's not what you think people are doing, it's why you think people are doing it.
Yeah. And worrying about people's intent and what are they trying to
Yeah.
come up with. And it's so interesting, isn't it? If you're having a bad day, that will play in your mind and you'll ruminate
Mm.
over it and think all the worst case scenario possible.
Yeah.
situations of, yeah, they're definitely going to make sure I'm fired, to
Mm.
on a good day it's probably like, oh hi, I haven't even noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right, I haven't even noticed, and we're
exactly.
just gonna have a conversation.
Yeah.
So, but that, I think what's really interesting about what you're saying there is we always think everyone else is kind of playing the political game, but we don't
Mm.
really think about what we're doing within that
No,
space.
no, the role we've got to play. So
Yeah.
it's and that's quite changing. Yeah, when I say that, I see people's face go, yeah, okay. So it's it's a really fascinating area, and it's not one that's ever covered very much. Actually,
Mm,
I there are other people that are trained with the same organisation as me in it, but I don't often come up against other people that do it. And even MBAs, I understand it's not covered, and certainly in my management degree, it wasn't covered either. So
yeah, and I think it's because for many years people saying, oh, we're not a political organization, people say these things, but in reality it is. And if you change the word, so sometimes I think we're really triggered by what the words are,
mm,
especially when it comes to anything work. It's like, oh, this is office politics, so it's going to be a work gloomy thing. If you just took it as it's my ability to influence and persuade people in the organization,
mm,
it then feels more like a skill and something that you could work on, something that you can do, and it
mm.
puts the focus back on you to do the things that you need to do rather than worrying about what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And put the focus on what's my role here. And someone's made a comment to me actually at the end of yesterday's workshop, which was really great to hear. She said to me, you've made me realize that we're not powerless in all these situations. We all have a
Mm,
role to play, because I was making the point that, yes, a lot of negative politics can come from negative culture, negative leadership, but it can also start in really small ways and then spread. So, equally, with individuals changing their behavior and behaving more positively, it can be changed the other way too. And she said to me, it's really helped to make me see I can make a difference.
yeah,
My behaviors can change situations and relationships.
definitely. And when I talk about work joy, it's a similar thing. It's like, actually you are responsible for this as an individual, personal
Yeah.
responsibility, and how you
Yeah.
decide to show up each day to your work, to the
Mm,
situations that are challenging, to
mm,
influencing people, to your network, will make a difference to how you feel about work every day. And it can make a
yeah.
difference to how the other people around you feel as well.
Yeah, it's really does make a massive difference. So it's thinking about what small steps can I take? How am I showing up in different situations? What impact am I having? What am I causing in a situation? Is someone reacting this way because of some way I'm behaving? And we definitely all
Mm,
need to be able to try and shine that mirror up to ourselves as well.
definitely. Oh, so interesting. If you're all right, I've got some quick fire questions for you.
Yes, please.
Are you ready?
Take it
Right.
away.
I'm going to go for it. First question for you personally, what's always guaranteed to bring you a little bit of work joy?
Oh, I think it is that connection. If I'm able to connect two people together, that can then help one or both of them, that's amazing. And I suppose a second one, if I'm allowed, a second one would
You can
be,
have two, it's fine.
it's okay. um, there's another podcast I was listening to this morning, not work related, and they're allowed to say yes, no, or up to one sentence in the quick fire round. So I'm cheating here. Um, I think the other one is when someone has what I call an aha moment, particularly in the
Yeah.
individual work I do, and someone goes, oh, okay, and you can start to see how we're hopefully unpicking the challenge they're facing.
Yeah, a great moment to have, isn't it? I love those two things. And, I'm not a big rule person. So if you want to do two, you can do two. It's fine.
Good to know.
Second question, what book are you currently reading?
Oh, I've actually got several on the go. I'm a very slow reader, and I have to admit, I'm not a massive reader. Despite having published my own book last year, I do struggle. I think because I'm so tired and I read a lot on the screen. On holiday, I
Yeah.
read loads of thrillers, but
Yeah.
at the moment, I have got the most enormous biography of the Queen that I'm reading. That I looked at, I thought, good grief, I've been reading it since January. I'm only on page 250, and it's 650 pages. So
Oh, wow.
going to
A
be a long
massive one.
one, but I'm quite a fan. So I thought I knew quite a lot about her, but I've actually learned a lot of new things.
Oh, cool.
And then I've also got, oh, I don't know what this says about me. I've been reading the biography of Dennis Nielsen, who committed some atrocious murders in, I think, the 70s. That I won't go into detail on them because it's quite unpleasant, but I just trying to understand where on earth did this behavior and mindset come from.
Mm,
Finish that one. It's quite hard going reading that. So that's
yeah.
they finished. And the third one is, there's a really good book. I've not read much of it yet, but I think it's 100 years of the Harvard Business Review and the best articles from that time. Uh,
Oh, right.
the only problem is the print is really small. Uh, I'm struggling a bit with that, even though I've got my reading glasses. But yeah, so 3 on the go at the moment, which is not ideal because it means I'm slowly reading all of them.
But working through it in different ways and
Yes.
different things. I love that. Question 3. What is one bit of advice that you have been given in your life that you always find yourself coming back to?
This probably comes from running a small business, but I think it equally applies in people in corporates as well, actually. Should get it always questioning, should I be doing this task or should I be getting someone else to do it?
Yeah.
When you start your own business, you don't have money to pay people to do stuff. But I've definitely in the last few years tried to use this. And the other night I was on the way back from an event and I had some people signed up for something on my website. And I thought, I could just sit here and do this. I was like, no, that's my assistant's job. Katie needs to do that. A, she's probably quicker than me. And B, I've been out, had a very long day. I can either do some other work or maybe just sit and look at something else on the train. So I think it's, think about who should be doing the tasks around you. And I talk about this with individuals and corporates about delegating, and not to sound rude, but every task should always go in a big corporate to the lowest possible level it can, so that everyone gets the opportunity to step up and do different things and use their time well.
Yeah, and I do find actually, and this is a total sideline to your point here, but going back to what we talked about is when people are technically excellent at their job, they find that bit very hard to let go. But when you move into leadership levels, that's the stuff you have to let go. Otherwise, you can't do the leading bit.
No, and people are always shocked by how much time the leading and managing people stuff takes. It takes up a lot of their time if they've not been used to doing it. And so, of course, you have to relinquish the technical tasks that perhaps are your comfort zone and you enjoy doing. But it's important.
For sure. And have you got one bit of advice for all of our listeners that is something that you would recommend they could go and do today, tomorrow, the next day that would help them get a little bit more work joy in their lives?
I think it's what we were talking about. It's build your network, get to know people. Think about who do I need to know, who can help me externally. Maybe if it's not even for now, but just go and share with people. Go to an event, talk about the challenges you've got at work. You don't have to give anything away, but just to get support and input from other people, whether that's in different sectors, different companies, I would definitely focus on that. And I know most people dread the thought of doing that, but it's finding ways you can do that. And a lot of people do it very well in their personal lives, but it's then how do you do that well in a work context?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's one of those things. I always think it's a bit like going to, you love going to the gym, so you might not feel like this, but I don't like the bit before you go to the gym, like the getting ready and going. Once I'm there and once I'm doing it, I love it. And afterwards, I'm like basking in the glow of, the joy of it. I think networking has a similar thing for many people, which is the before bit is bad, the during and the after bit is great. So you just have to get through the before bit.
Definitely. And just keeping in mind that everyone there's a human being as well, and they're probably not that up for it either. And can you just have some nice conversations? And I've had conversations which I didn't think would go anywhere from a work business perspective, but then 3 months later that person's got in touch and I thought, oh well, that's nice, because I think we just had a nice conversation and we had a point of connection, shared interest, and so that can be the joy in it, I think.
Definitely, like the unexpected joy of it versus the awkward. And almost I always think, like, just address the elephant in the room if it feels awkward. So you could go up to someone and say, isn't networking a bit awkward? And you start a conversation from there and you just working through it. Brilliant.
Definitely.
And then finally, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Oh, lots of places. My website, insideoutimage.co.uk, has it was redone last year. It's got a big resources section that's filterable by sort of categories, as well as you can search by topic. Ton of articles, webinars on there, videos. There are also some downloadable things as well. So my 9 skills needed for career success. It's about to have a bit of a revamp in terms of look and feel, but essentially that looks at 9 skills you need to navigate working life and progress your career. So that's one great source. LinkedIn, I'm easy to find with my unusual name, and I put loads of stuff there that would be helpful. So feel free to follow or even connect with me. And we couldn't finish without me mentioning my book. So this came out
Yay.
last November. Yay, finally. It's how people say, oh, you must feel so pleased and proud. I say, I feel relieved, because it was so much work, more work than I ever dreamt. But that came out in November, and I am really, really pleased with it and have some great feedback. So it's called Getting On, Making Work Work. It was an Amazon bestseller, so that's great. And I now am a bit like Del Boy, for those who remember Del Boy, carting around suitcases of my book when I go and speak. So I hadn't really thought about that aspect of getting on the train with multiple copies of my book. So I always say to people, please buy it so I don't have to carry it home, which usually works well. But that book is chock full of all the advice and guidance I've given to clients over the last 12 years, both in workshops and one-to-one. So part one is called It All Starts With You, because we do need to think about how we show up, raise our own self-awareness. So that's all the personal impact, thinking about how we manage our time, especially with increased seniority, because there's a practical aspect to that for ourselves, and the work-life balance or work-life blend, however you want to call that, but also a perception piece. And then section 2 is all about the relationships we need. So there's loads in there about internal, external relationships, dealing with different people, relationship skills, challenges. And then the final section 3, is about different professional scenarios and the skills you need for those. So such as great profile online, presenting, effective meetings, and also how to turn those into opportunities for you in your career. So it's chock full. It's got 19 downloadable resources that are on my website that you can get for free, and they link to the chapters so that you can actually take some action. And I don't envisage everybody who reads it is going to use all 19 resources, but you can pick and choose the ones you think are pertinent for moving your career forward and navigating. So you can get it Amazon, of course, any bookshop you can order it from. Hopefully it will be on the shelf, but if it's not, they can order it. And if you particularly want a signed one and you're in the UK, you can order one from my website, and I shall happily pop to the post office and put it in the post box for you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We will put all of those links, etc., into the show notes as well, so that people can click on straight through and get in touch with you. Joanna, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the WorkJoy Jam.
Oh, my pleasure, Beth. Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
A huge thank you to Joanna for joining me today on the WorkJoy Jam podcast. So many things to really consider from our conversation, and a few things that I'm really taking away. The first is about the power of network. I think this is such a big theme for us. And also not listening to the doubters, not listening to the people who are mood hoovers, who have their projection of their opinion on you versus really understanding what it is that you want. Maybe if you've got a friend or a colleague in that situation, asking a question rather than giving your advice unsolicited. Thinking about the fact that in our organisations, we're always going to need to have a network. We're always going to need to be able to navigate those politics. And actually, I really liked what Joanna was saying about making sure you have career time in your diary, whether you are considering making a career move now or in the future. Getting ready in advance rather than feeling like you're falling behind can be a really, really great thing to do. So thinking about them as skills, thinking about how do you develop the skills that you need beyond your technical expertise. What is it that you're going to be famous for in your organisation? What are people saying about you when you're not in the room? So a real bit of advice there from Joanna was to build your network, get to talk to people, get a different perspective, and see how that can really, really help you. And one I would totally agree with from a WorkJoy perspective. There is so much joy to be had when we connect with the right people. Thank you very much for listening to the WorkJoy Jam. There are plenty of other episodes to go and listen to. Do pick and choose the ones that really call to you, different people, different experiences, different backgrounds, different stories, and I love listening to them all. And remember that my book, WorkJoy, A Toolkit for a Better Working Life, is available right now in all good bookstores online. And we have Club WorkJoy available, which is our wonderful membership community of people all striving to get more joy in their life. Do go and check us out. Everything at createworkjoy.com. Thank you.